Great to be here. Always good to be in Belgium. I'm Nick Mason, as Kun says. I'm the CEO and co-founder at Turtl. We're a tech solutions provider, and we help businesses close the gap, as we're going to see, between their content investments and the revenue and pipeline that they get out at the other side. Really interesting listening to the talk so far this morning, and thinking about how the focus in the marketing world has shifted over the 10 years that I've been attending marketing conferences. I think that the focus on pipeline and revenue and aligning efforts in those directions, every time I come to one of these, feels more and more acute. And we're going to be talking about a bit of this as we go through. As Kun says, we have our roots in psychology and how people read and what causes people to engage and spend longer with content. And I've spoken about that previously. We've also invested a lot in personalization and getting messages so that they're more attuned to the individual who's receiving them. But today I'm going to be talking about, as Kun said, AI and revenue. And there's going to be a live demo of some AI. I'm going to go one better than a video. And I'm not nervous about that at all. So over the next, honestly, it's terrifying. So over the next 30 minutes, I'm going to be talking about the revenue gap, what that is, what it means. And then I'm going to be talking about some examples of how AI can be applied for content production and for outcome optimization. And the key point here is I'm going to be showing a lot of the stuff that we've been innovating on. I'm a technologist, a geek at heart, and so I want to show you some of the stuff that we've been doing. But the purpose of this is not to say, oh, isn't Turtl great, you should totally use us. It's more to give you ideas around what should be possible and what you should be looking for in the next stages of technological advancement, particularly as AI becomes ever more pervasive. So hopefully we'll provide some inspiration and some ideas as to what's going to be possible in the future. So hopefully 30 minutes. I'm also the world's worst timekeeper, so it could be 30, could be here for 3 hours, could be here for 5 minutes. Let's see. So to talk about the revenue gap, marketing is on the hook for revenue. We've been saying this for a little while now, but I've never heard the term or the word revenue used at a marketing conference as often as it has been today. I think it's been like dozens of times. Used to hearing like lots of other things going on, but the focus on revenue is absolutely extreme. And so what we're really interested in as a business, and the way that we're framing a lot of what we do, is in the terms of the revenue gap. And what I mean by this is content is a very important and large part of a business's marketing budget. We did a survey, as we'll see, relatively recently, back end of last year, and it varies between sort of 25 to 45% of spend. But the challenge, we're going to come on to this, is the gap between those investments and the provable outputs. And there was a comment made earlier about all the stuff that we do to build brand, but how hard it is to tie that back to revenue. And this really sort of demonstrates that point, where when you've got the CFO breathing down your neck saying you're spending all this money trying to build your brand, your thought leadership and all of that stuff you're putting out into the market, show me how that's hitting pipeline and revenue. It's a little bit difficult to do. And this is the revenue gap. And this is what we are really interested in trying to solve. Illustrated nicely with the shark at the bottom. You don't want to fall in between the two pillars. And so, as I say, we did some research at the back end of last year, just to call out a few key stats. The overwhelming majority, 86%, say that proving content's impact on revenue would make their job easier. And again, refer back to all of that brand building activity, all of that work that we try and do to build that trust and that relationship in the market, being able to tie that back and say, actually, this is how this impacted commercial results. Big help for marketing leaders. Basically, every CMO saying that if they could do that, draw the link between content and revenue, make their team more performant and efficient. And we're going to look at some ways in which we could potentially try and achieve that. And 58% agreeing that having that attribution would alleviate pressure in their roles. I can only assume that the other, 42% have even bigger problems to solve than not being able to tie back content spend to delivered pipeline and revenue. So that's some of the sort of precursor, some of the motivation, I suppose, for wanting to look at these topics. And so we're going to be spending, as I say, somewhere between 5 minutes and 3 hours now, looking at how AI can help us close that gap between that big investment in content and trying to build brand and the revenue and the pipeline that we get out of the other side. So the first observation to make, as everyone knows, is that AI can write copy. And this is just a selection of LinkedIn posts that I've come across recently, and probably everyone has, around how AI is going to write everything that you do going forwards. There's a lot of debate about whether it ought to be doing that. But what we're seeing when we speak to businesses, enterprises, is that there's different levels of appetite for this. Some people are actually writing everything from scratch with AI. Others are using it to research and inform and tweak and edit and bring things into line with the house style. But I think that, it's pretty obvious at this point that the genie is out of the bottle, and the way that content and copywriting happens in large enterprises and in every business is sort of changed for good. I don't think there's any going back. Out of curiosity, show of hands, how many people are using AI, Jasper, OpenAI, at any point during the copywriting process today? There you go, right? It's here, and I don't think you're planning to roll that back, right? No, shaking of heads. So we already know this. What we're finding, and what this helps us to do is to make our costs cheaper when we think about that revenue gap, right? It should make us quicker, it should mean we can get more done, it should lower costs. And what that does, and we're going to be seeing this diagram quite a lot, is to move this pillar on the left-hand side in towards the right to make the gap slightly smaller and more manageable. So we're able to get the same amount of work done, but at a lower cost, and start to shrink that gap, right? Fundamentally, with that framing, that's what AI is letting us do. But what we're finding, really interestingly, when we go in and speak to businesses who are using AI, is something like this. To generate copy is something like this, where before the copywriting was taking, let's call it 10 days, and it varies. There's all the research, there's the editing, there's the translation, all that kind of stuff was taking 10 days. And then production would take 10 days. So once you've got those words, you need to turn it into something that you can actually share with the market. Because the words alone are only half of the story. If anyone's a Marshall McLuhan fan, the idea of the medium and the message is the idea that half of the communication is what you say, the other half is how you say it. And I'm sure we've all been offended in the past by how someone said something rather than the content of the message they were trying to get across. So we see this, 10 days to get the message right, 10 days to actually put it into a form which is going to do our brand justice and engage our audiences. And as Kun was saying, this is where all the psychology that we do lives, down in this area here. So 20 days to get an asset into market, idealized numbers. What we're finding is that after people have used or have got used to using AI, the actual copywriting aspect of that shrinks massively. I've put in here by a factor of 5, and there's a huge range there. But people finding that part far more manageable in terms of time and spend to get that done. But production typically remains unsolved. And so people are staring down the barrel of 10 days of production to get an asset into market when they've just got used to the fact that they can spin up the actual words, the copy, the ideas much, much quicker. And so while at the current stage, those businesses are perhaps 2 times faster, going from 20 days to 12 days, there's still a lot to do. And so the challenge that we've taken on as a business is to see what we can do in our world to turn production into 2 days. Because if we were able to do that, we wouldn't be operating 2 times faster, we'd be 5 times faster, and we go from 20 days to get an asset, an idea into the market, down to 4 days, which is obviously preferable and helps us to move things forwards. And this is the part at which I start to sweat, because the challenge, what it looks like, is taking raw copy, like this here, and can we turn that, in our case, into a final piece of interactive material, which is on brand, high quality, uses imagery, has interactivity. Can we do that in the same way that AI can, for example, generate an image of a turtle in space, which is what we had on the front cover? So that's the challenge that we set ourselves, and I want to share the progress that we've made on this. So this is me internally at the moment as we do this. So I have to follow my instructions quite carefully here to avoid that situation getting any worse. So this is what we're going to be working with, right? And this is a sample piece of content that has been built, unsurprisingly, using AI. I just created it for like a test, right? And so what I'm going to do is, I'm going to do this all live, is I'm going to download this as a PDF. Now I really am sweating. Okay, let's see, has that gone into my downloads? Yes, great. Okay, so now I need to go back to here. And so what I'm going to do is upload that into this environment. Go on Wi-Fi, there we go. Okay, so I'm going to take this. I'm going to drop that in here. Okay, It's like a science experiment, right? I'm going to click continue. Right. So we're going to ask to design layouts with Content AI. And we've got some image options, and I'll talk more about these in a minute. But for now, I'm going to choose add best matches from the library, and I'm going to click start import. Okay. All right. So the first thing that's happening is AI is going and reading that content. And what it's going to do is build a semantic tree of what's going on in that content. So you've got different paragraphs, different chapters, different elements of information, and it's going to build a tree to understand and reason with that content that's in there and with the message. And all things being well, we should get a table of contents. So what it's done here is it's looked at it and it's worked out what that semantic tree is. And then I can go and edit this if I want to. What I'm going to do, however, is click Finish Converting. I think that's what I've got to do next. And now we're going to go back to look at, this is going to take a couple of minutes, at which point I'm going to be doing this. And I'm going to explain what's going on. So while we're waiting, and I'm sweating, the AI is reading the text, it's done that, and it's chunked it into semantically related sections, and it's got a tree, right? It's going to look at the other brand assets that we've uploaded to the platform. So we've got a lot of content on our platform, as you can imagine. And at the moment, what it's doing is it's looking across it for layout inspiration, for image inspiration, to understand our house style, how we lay things out, and all that kind of good stuff, right? So it's learning, it's not just generating a piece of content, it's generating our piece of content. It's going to select the best layouts and styles based on that research that it's done, and it's going to determine its media needs. So, obviously, as with all brands, we use image and video and all that kind of good stuff, and it's going to work out, well, typically, this brand uses one image per 300 words, let's say, and so we want to keep that consistent throughout with variation. It's going to find semantic image matches, so it's going to go into all of the images that we've used previously in our platform, and it's already done this, but it's going to tag them according to what they show and what they represent, and then it's going to pick based on those. So if we're talking about this particular topic, it's going to say, well, I need an image for this topic. It's going to go look it up, and it's also, and I didn't tick this option because it takes longer, generate any images that are missing from scratch. So we don't have a picture, for example, of looking out over Antwerp, but if we said that we needed one absolutely for the content, it could go and generate that for us. And then it's going to put everything together, and it's going to tweak it. And I think I've probably been talking long enough for AI to have done its job. So cross your fingers. Let's see what we've got back. Okay. The Buyer's Guide to Revenue Content Platforms, that's the piece that we downloaded. So let's go across and let's see how AI has done. So first of all, you can see it's laid everything out. We've got all the content in here. It's picked images from our brand library, and it's done a pretty good job. There's some stuff that we always have to tweak, like this, for example. It's cut the text off a little bit. We can fix that quite quickly. And so what it's done is it's gone and created, looks pretty good, an asset which takes all of that content, puts it into our styles and our layouts. It's included some interactivity if we go back there. So it's asked a question, and part of the prompt is like, make this interactive so we can ask questions within there. And it's actually done a really nice job, which is a great source of relief for me. Some more overflowing text there. But hopefully that gives you an idea of what can be done by training a specific model to create specific types of content assets. Whether it's a document, which is what we specialize in, or videos or whatever, this kind of thing now should be possible, if not today, then in the near future, for pretty much all the different types of content that we create. And so we've got something here which is, okay, that's funny. So this is where I'd probably want to change that image before it went out. But this is where someone once described to me that you've got to treat AI like a really enthusiastic intern. And I think that this is good evidence of that. So anyway, there we go. That's what AI can do. And now I can breathe a sigh of relief. So that's what happened just there, which is quite cool. And so what happens when you're able to do that, when you're able to cut down the ideation, the drafting, the copywriting, the editing, the translation, and the production, is you can move this column into the right-hand side even more. And as you can see, as we develop this diagram, start to close the gap and make it more surmountable. How are we doing for time? Oh, the timer didn't start. Never mind. So that's what we're doing. But there's a much bigger picture here, right? So we've spoken about purely moving the left-hand side column, which is important because we all want to do things more efficiently and do more with less, if anyone else is sick of that phrase by now. But there's a much bigger picture that this needs to fit into. So this is a diagram that we use that I'll walk through really quickly just to think about this internally. We think about producing the asset, personalizing the asset, which is a topic that we won't get onto today, publishing and tracking, and then we think about revenue signals, the ability to focus resources, and the ability to report, learn, rinse and repeat, and then roll in third-party intent signals to that whole program, either at the start or at the end, depending on what people want to do, in order to fuel it. And the whole thing should create a flywheel where we have the feedback loops to get better and better over time. I'm going to talk a little bit now about what that looks like. So, another diagram, sorry. What we see as the opportunity and what we're really working on is the ability to tie every single content asset back up to the revenue story. And what that looks like in our world is if we take the asset that we just produced, it looks a little bit different, AI picked a different front cover this time, we should be able to take signals, information, data points around how every single contact, anonymous and identified, every single account identified with every single asset, engaged with every single asset. So what did they read, how long for, where did they drop off, who did they share it with, what channel did we acquire them on, and so to build up a complete picture of the digital footprint that they've left across that asset. Where it gets really interesting though is when we can push that into some kind of system of record for revenue or for pipeline tracking. So like a HubSpot, a Salesforce, a Marketo. And what's interesting there is when that can be merged with deal data. So that you can say this deal had these types of digital fingerprints, footprints left on it by these contacts, by these accounts as it moved through the pipeline. And that becomes really important later. The other thing that we can do is we can talk about the asset itself. So what was the asset about? How long was it? What formats did it use? What imagery did it use? So we can really understand what it was that the individual or the account engaged with. So going to the right-hand side, we've got what was that engagement pattern and how did that influence deals? And coming up here, we've got what was the asset? How can we get a complete understanding of that? And that allows us to do some quite interesting things. First of all, we can actually provide the ROI on that content asset. So we can track all of the engagements, how it influenced deals. Was it one touch point or 50 touch points? Did they read for 2 minutes or 5 minutes? How did that topic correlate with the thing that they ultimately bought in the end across a very long period so that we can tie that back and we can say that dollar that you spent here directly contributed to this deal getting over the line. So again, thinking back to that idea around how do you attribute spend on brand to commercial outcomes, this is the sort of thing that becomes possible when you adopt that framework that I spoke about earlier. And to give an example of how this can show up in the real world, you can break it down to the individual deal level. So you can talk about, these, obviously this is sample data, which deals does this influence, what topics were used to close that deal, how long did it take, and what role did content play in that process. And we've been lucky enough to sort of pioneer and co-create a lot of this with some big names. And one of those is Kantar. And we went on a really interesting journey with them where we do a fair bit with their content teams, supporting them in creating assets. And they came to us actually with this exact problem. And they said, well, look, it's great because we're creating assets and we can see how many people downloaded it and what accounts they were from and clicks and all that sort of stuff, but we can't tie it back to revenue. So we said, oh, that's fortuitous because we're developing all this stuff right now. And so they sent us all of their data and we processed it and we worked it all out. And we came back to them and we said, well, we think that based on this, the content that you have been creating has delivered a 450% increase in the revenue that can be attributed to marketing spend. And they took that to the higher ups and to the financial part of the business, and they said, rubbish, absolute rubbish. It's not 450%, don't believe it for 1 minute. So they took it away for about 3 months, and they pored over it, and they pulled it apart in all different directions. And then they came back to us, and they said, we were right, 450% was rubbish, it's 550%, which was a pleasant moment. So the point is, being able to tie that content spend and that engagement back to revenue is very possible. And what we're finding in almost all cases is that there is a very positive underlying story. And that gives me a lot of confidence because all of that money and all of that effort that's being spent on brand is having an impact. It's just that we don't know how to measure it. And when we do measure it, you get a good story. So that's quite exciting. That's the first piece that we can do when we set that up. And of course, that starts to move the pillar on the right-hand side into the left, because now we've got a clear ROI story to tell. So when our CFO comes and says, why are you spending all that money on brand? Well, this is why. We can start to close this gap and drive better commercial results for the business. Okay, so if we come back to this, provided that we've set this up correctly, we've got the content facets going in, which is all the information about what the content is and how this works, and we've got the signals and we've got the pipeline and revenue data, we can start to layer into that processing engine descriptive AI, diagnostic AI, predictive AI, to help us understand what are the patterns, what are the correlations, what are the things that are going on here, how can we start to reason around what drove what, cause and effect, and how can we even potentially start to predict what's going to happen next. And that's where this gets really interesting, because there are many different ways to think about what AI is, but one of the really useful ways is that AI is basically an exceptional way to get computers to work really well with unstructured data. And a lot of these signals, a lot of these things that go in are inherently unstructured in one way or another. And so being able to reason across those large data sets of that class of data and to pull out correlations in the way that a human being perhaps would if we had all the spreadsheets in the world and infinite time and coffee becomes a really palatable and interesting area to explore. And so naturally, that's an area that we have explored. And so what we can start to look at is where to focus. Based on the engagement that we're seeing, what can we start to look at in terms of who's really engaged, what topics are they engaged with, what channels are they engaging across, and where can we make recommendations for sales and marketing teams to focus their efforts in on the opportunities which actually are showing signs of really helping us to hit our numbers and build our pipeline in the coming periods. And it's worth saying that, like, you know, this sort of stuff has been available on platforms like LinkedIn for your advertising and various other platforms. But in our experience, in my experience, it's typically very underserved in the content space, particularly with all of that brand building stuff. And so the ability to do this is quite interesting in that area. And so being able to understand through that content who's engaging, what are the topics, what is their likelihood to buy. So I didn't mention this, but where you get this deal data going in and the engagement data, you can start to compare what that engagement data and what those engagement patterns say about that person's likelihood or that account's likelihood to go buy something based on what you've seen in the past. Is this an engagement pattern that typically leads in a closed loss deal after 9 months of hard work? Or is it something that's showing all the signs in terms of topics and engagement levels and number of people in the account engaging of a deal that's really going to go somewhere? And so that sort of stuff becomes possible. Off the back of that, you can start to look at what the next best action is, what asset types are driving the engagement, what channels, and who else in the company. And it's worth saying that, like, this isn't a Turtl specific thing, just to be really clear. There are loads of businesses that are looking at doing all this sorts of stuff. And so the message here is more around, this is what we should just start to expect from technology and from anything where we're investing money. Because if it can't create these sorts of signals, then it's not going to help us show and grow that revenue story. So this is not specific to us, to be really clear. This is just what we need to be doing going forwards. And so doing this with Kantar, we were able to help them generate 3 times more qualified sales ops from the content that they were producing. And I've underlined qualified, and I'm glad that I have, because these aren't just more like, hey, here's an MQL, someone downloaded something, aren't we great? Let's go and pat ourselves on the back. These are qualified sales opportunities where the salesperson has looked at this and said, actually, that's something that I think that I can close. And so it's the high quality stuff. We were talking earlier about hot leads. This sort of stuff, being able to drive that into sales was the type of benefit that Kantar were able to describe. So again, helping them to build that pipeline of revenue. And then finally, where to invest. So when we look across the whole piece, being able to find those patterns around what channels are working with what messages, with what audiences, what topics are resenating over here with that audience, and what types of documents, what types of use cases and formats, how can we start to paint a picture and understand how we can resegment our audiences and who's engaging with us based on a bunch of different facets that previously would have been, frankly, impossible to uncover. And so this, again, gets really interesting when you start to put those AI analysis tools on top of content data, deal data, and engagement data. All of these possibilities open up. And so with Kantar, we're able to describe a massive uptick in multi-threaded leads. So what this comes down to is the idea that you're working an account and you've got some interest from someone, you've got a few nibbles from a few different places, but we all know that we want to be multi-threaded, right? We were talking earlier about the need to establish the buying group and what have you. So if you've got a couple of nibbles and you know what piqued their curiosity in terms of topics, formats, channels, you can go and do more of that and push that into that account and start to generate more interest and get more engagement from those people, provided, of course, that they are in a mood to engage and that they are in some sort of buying cycle. So Kantar were able to do that quite successfully and generate many more multi-threaded leads, opportunities, whatever we want to call them. So that's some of the possibilities that AI opens up for us. And so what that does is it makes the gap much more tolerable. We've managed to decrease the inputs on the left-hand side, get content jobs done at much lower cost. We've been able to demonstrate a clear ROI from that spend, which moves the bracket on the right-hand side in, and also make suggestions and demonstrate impact in terms of how we can invest that money more profitably to generate more pipeline and revenue than we were previously, and therefore close the gap and make the shark very hungry. So that's most of what I wanted to talk about today. So I think it's been quite a quick talk. But I wanted to talk about one other thing, which is future applications, which has been touched on a few times this morning. But one of the favorite bits of my job is getting to speak to people at big enterprises who spend all day thinking about AI. And some of these people are terrifying, and I probably only understand about 5% of what they say. But the 5% that I do understand is pretty illuminating. And there's a pattern which is emerging that I wanted to share, because it seems to be the dominant pattern which everyone is talking about, which is this sort of agentic seller workflow. And this is particularly with the sales lens on it. This is where the pattern is that I've seen that I wanted to share. I think it's interesting. But doubtless there are people looking at similar patterns in the marketing world as well. And so what we have on the left-hand side is a business-aware agent. And people are looking at things called retrieval augmented generation for this, which solves a really important problem with AI that I'll just spend a moment talking about. So the problem with AI is you have a model, right? You have like a Jasper or an OpenAI. And if you want it to know about your business, you have to train the model on your business. And that creates two really big problems. Firstly, you're having to tell the model all about your business, which tends to be a bit of a data problem. And also what happens when Claude, or OpenAI or whatever you're using upgrades to like version 10 or version 15 or version 20. You have to go and retrain that model on all of the information. So this creates a real headache. So what retrieval augmented generation systems allow you to do is basically to take a foundational model but build your own business context and information in a database off to the side, which is then very portable. So that when the next greatest version of Claude or whatever comes along, you can just upgrade it in place and you don't need to retrain the model. And you're also not giving all of your information to an LLM. And so what this allows, what people are talking about, is a single pane of glass seller experience. No more CRM, no more email platform, no more any of this. What happens is that you come in and you've just got a single prompt box and you can type in as a seller, what should I do today? Tell me about this account. Who should I follow up with? What products are relevant for this business that I've been assigned? And. And we go dip into the foundational model and the knowledge base and we go and pull that up. So this model then, at that point, the business-aware agent is a fully knowledgeable on the latest business context. And of course, as I say, is easily upgradable to new models and contexts. But the agent is the brain. This single pane of glass is the brain, but it needs to be able to take action. It needs arms, it needs legs, it needs the ability to impact the real world. And so the ability to go into that and say, well, look, thank you for helping me research Barclays Bank. Please, can you draft me an email that I should send in the tone of voice and what have you? Or please, can you update the deal in Salesforce because I think it's moved forward? Or please, can you create a deck, perhaps using the sort of AI that I showed earlier for this particular business? And then to be able to tweak that and to get it to send. And so we're never leaving that single environment. So these are agent actions, automated processes that are driven directly from inside that business-aware agent. Sellers, we're talking about sales obviously in this case, can effectively take high quality actions and crucially, and this is really important, provide data to improve the agent knowledge base. So think about all of that data that we were talking about before around what's driving revenue, what's engaging people, what's pushing pipeline and all that, pushing that back into the knowledge base so that the next time the business-aware agent makes a recommendation, it can leverage all of that knowledge automatically and provide the seller with even better information and ideas around what to do. So this is the sort of thing that is emerging through conversations, particularly as you can see with people responsible for AI in sales. There's probably parallels that are emerging in marketing. I'm slightly less aware of those, to be honest. But I figured that was quite interesting to share in terms of where it appears these things are going to move in the future. And so if you think about platforms like Glean, if people are familiar with that over on the left-hand side, that is why they are skyrocketing at the moment. They provide all of this stuff on the left-hand side. So I thought that'd be interesting. This is some of the nerdier conversations that I have, which for me means they're probably quite nerdy, but I wanted to share that. So to summarize, I don't know how we are for time, but AI content can play a huge role in showing and growing the returns from our content investments. I've shown a few ways that we can do that. We can reduce the cost, we can point to revenue, we can start to uncover how all of that investment is driving pipeline and revenue, and we can also get recommendations and suggestions on how that money can work even harder. And so while AI can deliver significant benefits in reducing production time and costs, the Peter Drucker quote here, who's always got a great quote, is never more apt. There's nothing so useless as doing efficiently something that should never have been done at all. So if we can't show that that content is having an impact, the fact that we can do it more efficiently is neither here nor there. And I think we see this a lot with AI, where in the world of like do more with less, people are like, oh great, AI can do that more quickly without ever stopping to ask the question, should I have been doing that in the first place? And so I think in the rush to AI, we really have to bear this in mind. But luckily, AI can help us to answer whether we should have been doing it in the first place and whether we should keep doing it through the means that I said before. So the real value lies in AI's ability, I think, to steer our investments to maximize ROI and to prove the value of what we're doing and to guide us in the right direction. So anyway, that's that, and therefore close the revenue gap and we don't get eaten by sharks or the CFO. And that's me. Thank you very much. I hope that was interesting.